A billionaire saw a woman collecting aluminum cans at 5:04 in the morning, right outside his Philadelphia office tower. He almost looked away. Almost. But then her bag ripped, and what fell out was not trash. It was not drugs. It was not stolen property. It was a bound document with a name, a degree, and a university seal that made him stop breathing. In that moment, he made a decision that would unravel a secret, buried for 14 months, rewrite both their futures, and expose a connection neither of them knew existed. 46-year-old Desmond Harris had not slept more than 3 hours a night in over 2 years, not because he was busy, because the silence in his penthouse on the 31st floor of the Aria Tower was the kind of silence that forced a man to hear himself think, and Desmond Harris did not want to hear himself think. As CEO and sole founder of Harris Meridian Group, a logistics and supply chain empire valued at $7.8 billion with operations spanning 23 countries, Desmond had built something most people could not even imagine. His corner office overlooked the Schuylkill River. His art collection, $6 million of oil paintings and bronze sculptures lined hallways that no one walked through but him. His watch cost more than some families earned in a year. His name appeared on Forbes lists, on university donor walls, on hospital wings. None of it kept him warm at night. Desmond grew up in West Philadelphia. Not the version tourists photographed. The other one. The one with cracked sidewalks, boarded windows, and corner stores behind bulletproof glass. His mother Vivian Harris worked 2 jobs, daytime at a laundromat on Lancaster Avenue, nights cleaning offices downtown. She never complained. She never stopped moving. She used to tell him, "Baby, we don't have money, but we have each other, and that is worth more than anything in any bank." He was 14 when she started coughing, a dry, persistent cough that would not quit. She ignored it for weeks because the closest clinic was 4 miles away and closed by the time she finished her second shift. By the time a church volunteer drove her to the emergency room, the infection had spread to both lungs. Pneumonia, treatable. Completely, entirely treatable. With $200 of antibiotics and 3 days of rest, Vivian Harris would have lived. She died on a Tuesday, in a waiting room, before anyone called her name. That was the day Desmond stopped believing that the world respected people. He decided at 14, standing in a hospital hallway, holding his mother's purse, because no one told him what else to do, that the world only respected money, so he would get money. He would get so much of it that no one would ever make him wait again. And he did. He built Harris Meridian from a single truck and a used cell phone at 22. By 30, he had a fleet. By 35, a corporation. By 40, an empire. Every deal, every acquisition, every calculated risk was fueled by the same quiet engine. The memory of his mother dying in a plastic chair while bureaucrats shuffled paperwork behind a glass partition. But empires built on grief have cracks that money cannot seal. 3 months ago, his business partner of 12 years, Rowan Caldwell, vanished. Not retired, not relocated, vanished. Along with $43 million siphoned through a web of offshore accounts that forensic auditors were still untangling. Rowan had been more than a partner. He was the closest thing Desmond had to a friend. They had shared meals, strategies, secrets. Desmond had trusted him with access to accounts he did not give his own attorneys, and Rowan had bled him quietly for years. The betrayal did not make Desmond angry. It made him right. Every wall he had built around himself, every instinct that whispered trust, no one give nothing, freely protect yourself first. Rowan proved all of it. His father figure had been a thief. His longest friendship had been a con. The world was exactly what he had always believed it was. Transactional, predatory, cold. So now Desmond arrived at his office every morning at 4:45, not because he was dedicated, because his penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its river view and its $6 million art collection, echoed with the kind of emptiness that expensive things create when there is no one left to share them with. He sat alone in his corner office. He drank black coffee. He read reports. He signed contracts. And he waited for the sun to come up, because the darkness made the silence louder. That morning, the morning everything began to shift, His driver pulled the black sedan up to the front entrance of Harris Meridian Tower at 4:51 a.m. The street was empty. The city was still sleeping. But the headlights caught something. A figure, hunched beside the recycling bins at the corner of the building. A woman sorting through cans in the pre-dawn cold, her breath making small clouds in the January air. Desmond barely glanced. He had seen 1,000 people on 1,000 sidewalks doing the same thing. Philadelphia had over 5,700 people living without shelter. This was not new. This was not unusual. This was just the background noise of a city that had learned to look away. He stepped out of the car, adjusted his coat, walked toward the glass doors. But something pulled at the edge of his attention. Something small, something he could not name. The way she moved. Not frantic, not desperate, not chaotic, precise, deliberate, like someone executing a task they had planned in advance. He did not look back. He stepped into the elevator, pressed 31. The doors closed, and he told himself it was nothing. But the image stayed, pinned to the back of his mind, like a photograph he had not asked to take, and he did not know why. He did not know that by the end of the week, that woman would crack open every belief he had carried since he was 14 years old. And nothing, not his billions, not his walls, not his carefully constructed isolation, would protect him from what came next. The clock on his office wall read 5:04 a.m. when Desmond heard it. A faint, metallic rhythm from 31 floors below. Clink, pause, clink, clink, pause. He was standing by the window, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up the way he always did, alone. And there she was again. Same corner. Same spot beside the recycling bins. The streetlight cast a yellow glow over her shoulders, and from this height she looked small, almost invisible, the kind of person the city designed itself to forget. He should have turned away. He had reports to review. An 8 a.m. call with a shipping partner in Rotterdam. A legal briefing on the Rowan Caldwell investigation at 9. But instead, he stood at the window, watching. She was not scrambling. That was the first thing he noticed. Most people who collected cans moved fast, almost frantic, grabbing everything and stuffing it into whatever bag they carried. This woman was different. She had 3 bags, not 1, 3. And she was sorting. Aluminum into one, tin into another, plastics into a third. Each item examined for half a second, then placed, not tossed, placed. It looked like a system, efficient, practiced, the kind of method that came from repetition and planning, not desperation. Desmond set his coffee down. He watched her crouch beside a bin and pull out a crushed soda can. She flattened it with one palm against the pavement. Quick, clean, no wasted motion. Then, she dropped it into the first bag and moved to the next bin. Her route was consistent, left to right, never backtracking, never repeating. There was something else. Her clothes. They were worn but clean. The jacket had a small tear at one cuff, but it was zipped to the collar, neat, intentional. Her hair was pulled back tight. Not messy, controlled. And on her feet, a pair of sneakers that had seen better years, but the laces were tied carefully evenly, the way someone ties shoes when they still care about how they show up in the world. Her hands. Even from 31 floors up, he could see the way they moved, fast but accurate. And when she paused between bins, she wiped her fingers on her jeans. Not because they were dirty from the cans, because there was something else on them. A dark streak across her right index finger and thumb. Ink. Not grease, not grime. Ink. The kind that comes from writing. And she wore glasses. Not sunglasses, prescription lenses, the square, functional kind that sat on the face of someone who spent long hours reading. These details should not have mattered. Desmond had passed thousands of people on the streets of Philadelphia. He donated to shelters. He funded food banks through the Harris Meridian Foundation. He had done his part, or at least the part his accountants told him was tax efficient. He was not heartless. He was simply numb. The same way a doctor stops flinching after the 100th surgery. You see it so many times that it stops registering as pain. He turned from the window, sat down at his desk, opened his laptop. The Caldwell report glowed on the screen, columns of stolen numbers, routing codes, forged signatures. The kind of betrayal that was easier to process than standing at a window and wondering why a woman sorting cans at 5 in the morning moved like she had a degree. He worked through the morning, took the Rotterdam call, reviewed legal briefs, approved a shipment route through Panama. Normal day, productive day. But 3 times he stood up and walked to the window. She was gone by 6:15, her 3 bags tied and slung over her shoulders, her route complete. She disappeared around the corner of Walnut Street, heading east, and the sidewalk returned to being just a sidewalk. Desmond sat back down, loosened his tie. He could not explain it. He had watched a woman pick up cans. That was all. It should have meant nothing. But something about the way she moved, precise, purposeful, like someone executing a plan, rather than just surviving, had lodged itself behind his ribs, and it stayed there, all day, through every meeting. Through every phone call, through every silence in between. He told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. But Desmond Harris had not been curious about another human being in a very long time, and that more than anything unsettled him. Now, there is something you need to know about the woman on that sidewalk. Something Desmond did not know yet. Something that would have stopped him cold if he had. Her name was Aisha Franklin. She was 34 years old. And 2 years before she crouched beside those recycling bins, sorting aluminum cans for pennies in the pre-dawn dark, she had been one of the most promising public health professionals in the state of Pennsylvania. Aisha graduated with a Master of Public Health from Drexel University. Not just graduated, excelled. Her thesis, a 212-page study on reducing infant mortality in under-resourced communities, was cited in 3 state-level research papers before she even walked across the stage. Her model proposed training local women as community health workers to provide prenatal education and basic care in neighborhoods where clinics were either overcrowded or non-existent. The results of her pilot program were staggering. 1,200 families gained access to free prenatal care. Preterm birth rates in her target area dropped by 19% in a single year. Here is a number that matters. In the United States, Black women are 2.3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. That statistic comes directly from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It is not an opinion. It is a fact baked into the infrastructure of American healthcare. And Aisha Franklin had dedicated her career to changing it. After graduation, she became program director at a nonprofit called the North Philadelphia Health Equity Initiative. She managed a team of 11. She wrote grant proposals that brought in over $1.2 million in federal and state funding across 3 fiscal years. She spoke at community forums, trained volunteer health aides, and built partnerships with 2 hospital systems. She was not wealthy. She never would be. Nonprofit salaries in Philadelphia for a role like hers averaged between $52,000 and $61,000 a year. But that was never the point. Aisha did not choose this work for money. She chose it because she had grown up watching women in her own family receive medical care that was late, inadequate, or absent entirely. Her grandmother lost a baby at 7 months because no one at the county clinic took her blood pressure seriously. Her aunt drove 45 minutes to the nearest hospital that accepted Medicaid and was turned away because they were full. These were not distant statistics to Aisha. These were dinner-table conversations. Her husband, Wendell, understood that. He was an emergency room nurse at Temple University Hospital. Night shifts mostly. 12-hour rotations that left him hollow-eyed and quiet by morning. But he never once asked Aisha to choose a more profitable career. He believed in what she was building. He believed in her. Their daughter Kaya had just turned 5, a bright-eyed girl who loved drawing animals and asking questions that had no easy answers. Why is the sky dark before it is blue? Why do some people sleep outside? Where do butterflies go when it rains? The 3 of them lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Germantown. The kitchen faucet dripped. The radiator clanked at night. The hallway smelled like other people's cooking. But there were drawings taped to the refrigerator, and books stacked on every surface, and a feeling when you walked through the front door that someone in this home was paying attention. Someone cared. That was Aisha Franklin's life. 2 years ago. A career built on purpose. A family built on love. A woman who had taken the broken pieces of a broken system and tried to build something better with her bare hands before everything collapsed in 11 days. Day 1. A Tuesday in November. Wendell clocked in for his night shift at Temple University Hospital at 7 p.m. He drove the same route he always drove. Broad Street to Germantown Avenue, then the shortcut through Hunting Park. It was raining, not heavy, just enough to make the roads slick and the headlights blur. At 8:47 p.m., a delivery truck ran a red light on the intersection of Broad and Erie. The driver had been on the road for 14 hours. His logbook was falsified. His company had been cited twice before for overworking drivers. None of that mattered to Wendell in the 2 seconds between seeing the headlights and feeling the impact. The collision pushed his sedan 37 feet across the intersection. Firefighters used hydraulic tools to cut him out. He was unconscious when the ambulance arrived. Unconscious when they wheeled him into the same emergency room where he had spent 6 years saving other people's lives. Aisha got the call at 9:12 p.m. She was reading Kaya a bedtime story. The phone rang. She answered, and the floor beneath her life cracked open. Wendell was in the intensive care unit. Traumatic brain injury, internal bleeding, induced coma. The doctors used words like critical and guarded, and the next 48 hours will tell us more. Words designed to prepare families for the worst without actually saying it. Aisha did not sleep that night. She sat in a plastic chair beside his bed, holding his hand, watching machines breathe for him, and whispering things she was not sure he could hear. Day 2 through 7. The bills began. ICU care in a major urban hospital costs an average of $14,800 per day. Wendell's insurance through the hospital covered 60%. That left roughly $5,900 per day that Aisha owed out of pocket. In 6 days, the uncovered balance reached $35,400. Their savings account held $28,000. It was gone by day 5. Aisha called the billing department. She asked about payment plans. She asked about financial assistance programs. She was told to fill out forms. She filled out forms. She was told to wait. She waited. She was told her case was under review. No one called back. Day 8. A Monday. The machines had been breathing for Wendell for a week. The swelling in his brain had not decreased. His kidneys were beginning to fail. The doctor, a kind woman with tired eyes, sat Aisha down in a small room with no windows and told her that Wendell's brain activity had dropped below the threshold for meaningful recovery. He was gone, not all at once, not with drama or poetry. He was simply gone, the way a candle does not blow out, but just quietly runs out of wax. Aisha signed papers. She collected his wedding ring from a plastic bag. She walked out of the hospital into bright November sunlight and stood on the sidewalk for 4 minutes without moving. The total medical bill arrived 3 days later, $287,000. That number sat on a single sheet of paper inside a white envelope, and it weighed more than anything Aisha had ever held. Day 9. She returned to work, or tried to. The North Philadelphia Health Equity Initiative had lost its primary federal grant while she was at the hospital. Budget cuts. 40% of the staff were being let go. Aisha's position was eliminated. Not because her work was poor. Her last performance review had been outstanding. But she had taken emergency leave. She had missed deadlines. And in a nonprofit running on borrowed time and borrowed money, the person who disappears first is the person who gets cut first. Her supervisor could not look her in the eye. "I fought for you," he said. "I really did. The severance was 2 weeks of pay, $1,412 after tax." Day 10. The landlord's letter arrived. 2 months behind on rent. Total owed $2,200. A formal eviction notice. 30 days to vacate. Day 11. Aisha packed what she could into the back of Wendell's old sedan, the car he had driven to work that night, the car that had been towed from the intersection, repaired just enough to run, and returned to her along with a body she had to bury and a debt she could not carry. She buckled Kaya into the back seat. The little girl looked around at the bags and boxes. "Mommy, are we going camping?" Aisha gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. She opened her mouth to speak, closed it, tried again. "Something like that, baby. Something like that." She drove to the women's shelter on Germantown Avenue. It was full. She drove to the next one on Ridge Avenue, also full. She called 2 more. No availability until the following week. That night, Aisha Franklin, Master of Public Health Drexel University graduate, former director of a program that saved 1,200 families, slept in the front seat of a dead man's car with her 5-year-old daughter curled under a donated blanket in the back. And here is the thing most people do not know. Aisha's story is not unusual. It is not even rare. According to the American Journal of Public Health, 66.5% of all bankruptcies in the United States are tied to medical costs. Not poor decisions, not laziness, not lack of education, medical bills, one accident, one diagnosis, one invoice. That is all it takes to unravel a life that took decades to build. Aisha was not careless. She was not foolish. She was a woman who had spent her career helping others survive the exact kind of crisis that was now swallowing her whole. And the system she had studied, analyzed, and tried to reform did not care about her credentials. It processed her the same way it processed everyone else. Efficiently, indifferently, completely. Most people who collect cans do it the same way. They walk until they find one. They pick it up. They keep walking. There is no strategy, no route, no schedule, just movement and hope. Aisha Franklin did not operate on hope. She operated on data. Within 3 weeks of losing her apartment, she had mapped 6 collection routes across Center City, Philadelphia. Not guessed. Mapped. She used a free app on her cracked phone to track which blocks produced the highest volume of recyclable aluminum and at what times. She tested mornings, afternoons, and evenings. She counted. She compared. She adjusted. Route 1. The Financial District, 5 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. This was the richest territory. Office workers drank cans of soda, sparkling water, and energy drinks at their desks all day, then tossed them into street bins on their way to happy hour. By nightfall, the recycling bins along Market Street and Walnut Street were full. By 5 in the morning, before the sanitation trucks arrived at 6:45, those bins were a gold mine. 40 to 60 cans per block if she moved fast. Route 2. University City near Drexel and Penn, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Students discarded cans after morning classes. Coffee shops tossed aluminum into outdoor bins that were rarely sorted. Route 3. The restaurant corridor on East Passyunk, 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. After dinner service, kitchens cleared out dozens of cans from prep and staff drinks. If she timed it right, she could fill an entire bag from the alley behind 3 restaurants alone. She rotated all 6 routes across the week, never the same pattern 2 days in a row, not because she was hiding, because she had learned that other collectors worked the same streets and overlapping cost everyone time. Here is the math that governed her life. Recycling centers in Pennsylvania pay between 50 cents and 75 cents per pound of aluminum. A single aluminum can weigh approximately 14.9 grams. There are roughly 30 cans in 1 pound. To earn $25, Aisha needed to collect approximately 750 cans every single day. 750 cans. That is not a metaphor. That is the physical reality. Bending down 750 times, sorting 750 items, carrying 750 pieces of crushed metal in bags that cut into her shoulders and stained her clothes. She tracked everything in a small notebook she had taken from Kaya's school supply pack. Each page was a day. Each day had a column for route time, can count, weight estimate, and payout. Some days she drew small bar charts comparing routes. Wednesday versus Thursday, morning versus evening, rain days versus dry days. On a good day, she earned $31. On a bad day, $23. Her monthly average hovered around $810. Rent for the cheapest studio apartment in Philadelphia started at $1,100. The math never balanced. But the math was not the point. The point was Kaya. Every morning at 6:45, after her first route, Aisha walked to the Germantown Avenue Women's Shelter, where they had been staying since a bed opened up in late December. The shelter ran a free daycare program from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Kaya would eat breakfast there. She would do coloring worksheets and practice writing her name. She would be safe and warm and supervised by people who checked on her. That was the window. 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. 10 hours. Aisha used every minute. She collected cans from 7 to 11. She walked to the recycling center on Spring Garden Street, weighed her haul, and collected cash. She bought groceries with whatever was left after setting aside bus fare for the next day. She picked Kaya up at 4:45. They ate dinner at the shelter. Aisha read to her until she fell asleep. Then she sat on the edge of the cot and opened her notebook, planning the next day, adjusting the routes, calculating whether she could add a seventh route near the stadiums on weekends. She did not do this because she had no other options. She had applied to 47 jobs in 6 months. She had a master's degree, 3 state-level citations, and 6 years of program management experience. She got 3 interviews. All 3 asked about the gap in her employment. All 3 ended the same way. So she collected cans. And she did it with the same precision, the same discipline, and the same relentless focus she had brought to every project she had ever managed. Because Aisha Franklin did not know how to do anything without a plan. And this plan, however small, however humiliating, kept her daughter fed 3 meals a day. She optimized aluminum collection the way she had once optimized healthcare access for 1,200 families. The scale was different. The stakes were exactly the same. The second morning, Desmond arrived at 4:48 a.m., earlier than usual. He told himself it was the Caldwell audit. He told himself there were documents to review before the legal team arrived at 8. He told himself he needed the quiet. None of that was true. He stood at the window on the 31st floor, coffee in hand, and waited. At 5:02 she appeared. Same corner, same 3 bags, same efficient rhythm. Clink, sort, place, move. She worked the recycling bins on Walnut Street, then crossed to the row along 18th. Methodical, unhurried. Like a woman punching a clock, not begging for survival. This time something new. She stopped between bins, leaned against a lamppost, pulled a phone from her jacket pocket, not a smartphone. An older model with a cracked screen that caught the streetlight. She tilted it toward her face and began reading. Scrolling slowly. Not the quick thumb flick of social media. This was the slow, deliberate scroll of someone reading something dense, something long. Desmond squinted. He was 31 floors up. He could not see the screen, but he recognized the posture. He had seen it 1,000 times in boardrooms, in his own reflection. The slightly forward lean, the narrowed eyes, the occasional pause to reread a section. That was not someone checking messages. That was someone studying. He stood at that window for 11 minutes before he made himself sit down. The third morning he arrived at 4:43 a.m. He did not bother lying to himself about why. She was there at 5:06. Same routine, same precision. But at 5:20 a man approached her. Older, unshaven, wearing a coat held together with duct tape. He shuffled toward her and said something Desmond could not hear from above, but he could see her reaction. She stopped sorting, turned to face him fully, spoke for almost 2 minutes. Not a quick brush-off, a real conversation. She pointed east, then south, then east again. She held up 3 fingers, then 5. Later that day, out of curiosity he could not explain, Desmond searched for free medical clinics east of Center City. The closest one was the Esperanza Health Center on North 5th Street. Open Monday through Friday. Walk-in hours 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 3 blocks east, then south on 5th, then east again to the entrance. She had given that man directions. Exact directions, with hours of operation, from memory. Community health workers did that. Outreach coordinators did that. Social workers did that. People who collected cans at 5 in the morning did not do that. The 4th morning he was at the window before 5. He had not slept. The Caldwell investigation was reaching a critical phase, and the forensic auditors had found a second set of forged signatures. But it was not the audit keeping him awake. She arrived at 4:58, 2 minutes earlier than usual. She worked faster this time. The temperature had dropped overnight, and her breath made thick clouds in the cold air. At 5:19, she sat down on the curb between 2 recycling bins. She pulled the notebook from her back pocket, the same one she always carried, and she began writing. Not words, numbers. Small, precise figures in tight columns. And next to the columns she drew something. A small graph. 2 axes, dots connected by a line. It was rough. It was drawn with a ballpoint pen on lined paper in near darkness. But it was unmistakably a chart. People who sleep in shelters and collect cans for a living do not draw charts on the curb at 5 in the morning. Desmond set his coffee down. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the window, and for the first time in years he asked himself a question that had nothing to do with money contracts or betrayal. Who is she? He did not have an answer, but he could not stop asking. The 5th morning he did not go upstairs. His driver pulled the sedan to the curb at 4:52 a.m. Desmond stepped out, adjusted his coat, and instead of walking through the glass doors of Harris Meridian Tower, he stood on the sidewalk, across the street, in the shadow of the building's east entrance, watching. She arrived at 5:01. She began her route, bin to bin, sort, flatten, place. The rhythm he had memorized from 31 floors above now played out at street level. Closer, louder. The metallic clink of aluminum against aluminum. The rustle of plastic bags. The soft scrape of her shoes on wet pavement. It had rained overnight. The sidewalk was slick. She moved carefully, adjusting her footing around a puddle near the 3rd bin. Her bags were heavier than usual. A good haul. She shifted the weight to her left shoulder, reached into the bin with her right hand, and pulled. Her foot slipped. Not dramatically. Not a fall. Just a half-step slide on the wet concrete. But the motion jerked her body sideways, and the bag on her right shoulder, the one she used for non-aluminum items, caught on the edge of the bin and tore open. Cans scattered across the sidewalk. A water bottle rolled into the gutter, and something else fell out. Something that was not a can, not a bottle, not recyclable material of any kind. A bound document. Clear plastic cover. White pages. The kind of binding you get at a copy shop for a few dollars. It hit the pavement face up, and a few loose pages fluttered in the early morning wind. Aisha dropped to her knees immediately. Not to collect the cans, to grab the document. She snatched it off the ground with both hands, pressing it against her chest like a mother pulling a child from traffic. The cans could wait. The cans were worth pennies. Whatever that document was, it was worth something money could not replace. Desmond moved without thinking. Crossed the street in 6 strides. Bent down. Picked up 2 loose pages that had blown toward the curb, and held them out to her. She looked up, eyes wide, startled. The way an animal looks when it realizes it has been watched. "Here," he said. These blew over. She reached for the pages, fast, almost grabbed them from his hand. But in that half-second before her fingers closed around the paper, Desmond saw the cover page of the document she was clutching to her chest. Black text on white paper. Clear plastic binding. A title in bold 12-point font. Reducing Infant Mortality in Under-Resourced Communities, a Community Health Worker Model. Below the title, a name, Aisha R., Franklin MPH. Below the name, an institution, Drexel University Dornsife School of Public Health. Desmond's hand froze in midair. MPH, Master of Public Health. This woman, this person, who had been crouching in front of his building every morning sorting aluminum cans for pennies, held a graduate degree from one of the top public health programs in Pennsylvania. And the document she protected more fiercely than the cans that fed her daughter was her thesis, her academic work, the thing she had built with her mind before the world took everything else. "That's nothing," Aisha said. Her voice was sharp, defensive. She shoved the pages into the document, pressed it flat, and stuffed it back into her bag. "It's old. It doesn't matter." She stood up, grabbed her remaining bags, turned away. "Wait," Desmond said. She did not wait. She walked, fast, shoulders squared, head down. She turned the corner of Walnut Street heading east and disappeared behind the old brick facade of a parking garage. The same direction she went every morning. The same vanishing act. But this time she left something behind. Not a can, not a page, a name. Desmond stood on the sidewalk for a long time. The city was waking up around him. Cars beginning to move. A bus hissing to a stop at the corner. His phone buzzing in his pocket. None of it registered. He walked into the building, took the elevator to 31, sat down at his desk, opened his laptop, And instead of the Caldwell audit, instead of shipping manifests or legal briefs or investor reports, he typed 5 words into the search bar. Aisha R. Franklin Drexel. The results loaded in less than a second. And each one hit him like a freight train. A citation in a Pennsylvania Department of Health report on maternal mortality reduction, her model referenced as a framework for statewide community health worker training. A second citation in a study published by the University of Pennsylvania on prenatal care access in low-income zip codes. A third in a policy brief submitted to the governor's office. Then, a link to the website of the North Philadelphia Health Equity Initiative, archived now. But the Our Team page was still cached, and there she was, Aisha Franklin, MPH, Program Director. A professional headshot, blazer, hairstyled, smile that carried the weight of someone who had earned every word on her resume. Same eyes, same jawline, same woman, standing in front of a podium at what appeared to be a community health conference, pointing at a projected slide that read 1,200 families served, 19% reduction in preterm births. The woman collecting cans at 5 a.m. outside his building had once stood in front of rooms full of doctors, policymakers, and researchers and told them how to save lives. Her work had been read by people who shaped health policy for an entire state. Her model had helped more families than most charities helped in a decade, and now she was sorting aluminum on a sidewalk for $30 a day. Desmond leaned back in his chair. He stared at the photo on his screen. Then he looked out the window, at the empty corner where she had been standing 20 minutes ago. 2 images of the same person, separated by what looked like a lifetime, but was probably no more than 2 years and 1 catastrophic piece of bad luck. He was not sad. Sadness was too soft a word for what moved through him. It was something closer to rage. Not at her, not at himself, at the distance between what she was and where she was. At a system that could take a woman with a master's degree, a published thesis, and 6 years of life-saving work and drop her on a sidewalk with a bag of cans and no way back. He closed the laptop, opened it again, stared at the photo one more time. But Desmond did not know the most important part yet. The part that would pull him into this story deeper than any deal he had ever negotiated, deeper than any betrayal he had ever survived, deeper than the $43 million Rowan Caldwell stole from him. Because buried inside that thesis, inside those 212 pages of research and data and hope, was a name Desmond had not spoken out loud in 32 years. And when he found it, everything he thought he understood about this woman, about himself, and about the distance between giving and receiving would collapse. Now, before we go any further, there is something you need to understand. Not about Aisha, not about Desmond, about the country they both live in. Because Aisha Franklin's story is not unusual, it is not even rare. And the fact that it feels shocking says more about what we choose not to see than about what actually happens. Here is a number. 1 in 4. According to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, approximately 25% of people experiencing homelessness in the United States have a college education or higher. That is not a typo. 1 out of every 4 people sleeping in shelters, cars, or on sidewalks has sat in a classroom, written papers, taken exams, and earned a degree. Some have bachelor's degrees, some have master's degrees. Some have professional licenses. And they are invisible. Here is another number, 40%. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, 4 out of 10 people counted as homeless in America are employed. They go to work, they earn paychecks, and, at the end of the day, they do not have a home to return to, because wages have not kept pace with housing costs in any major American city for over 2 decades. A minimum wage worker in Pennsylvania would need to work approximately 89 hours per week to afford a 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. That is not a failure of character. That is a failure of arithmetic. And here is the number that connects directly to Aisha's story. 530,000. That is the estimated number of bankruptcy filings each year in the United States linked to medical expenses, not elective procedures, not luxury treatments. Emergency room visits, ICU stays, ambulance rides. The kind of care you cannot refuse because the alternative is death. The American Journal of Public Health found that 66.5% of all bankruptcies in this country have a medical component. A single hospital stay, a single accident, a single diagnosis. That is the distance between a stable life and a sidewalk. And no degree, no resume, no amount of hard work can protect you from it. There is a term that researchers use: hidden homeless. These are people who do not appear in official counts because they are not sleeping on park benches or in subway stations. They are sleeping in cars, en couche, in shelters that cycle them in and out every 30 days, in motels paid for by emergency vouchers that expire. They have addresses on paper but no permanence. They exist in the margins of the data, and because they are not visible, they are not counted. Estimates suggest the true number of people without stable housing is 3 times higher than the official figure. Aisha Franklin was one of them. A woman with a graduate degree, a published body of research, and the knowledge to redesign healthcare systems for entire communities, sleeping in a shelter, collecting cans, making $30 on a good day. She was not a failure. She was a product of a system that treats housing as a privilege, healthcare as a commodity, and human potential as something that only matters when it comes attached to a paycheck. And Desmond Harris, the man who believed the world only respected money, was about to discover something about Aisha that would challenge that belief at its root. Something that had nothing to do with her degree, her research, or her ability to organize aluminum cans with the precision of a logistics manager. Something far more personal. Something he was not prepared for at all. The 6th morning, Desmond did not send his driver ahead. He drove himself, parked 2 blocks east on Chestnut Street at 4:38 a.m., walked to the coffee shop on 18th and Walnut that opened at 4:45 for the early finance crowd, ordered 2 black coffees, stood outside Harris Meridian Tower in the cold holding both cups and waited. He had rehearsed what to say, in his head, in the shower, in the car. A man who had closed deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, who had negotiated with governments and unions and hostile boards, was standing on a sidewalk at 4:50 a.m., rehearsing how to offer a cup of coffee to a woman who collected cans. She arrived at 5:07, later than usual. She looked tired, more tired than the other mornings. The bags under her eyes were darker, her movements slightly slower, but still precise, still methodical. Still sorting aluminum from tin from plastic with the same discipline that had caught his attention on day 1. Desmond crossed the street. His shoes clicked against the pavement. She heard him coming, looked up, and the moment she saw who it was, her body stiffened. Not surprise, recognition. She remembered him. The man who had picked up her pages, the man who had seen her thesis. "I figured you might need this," Desmond said, holding out one of the coffees. "It's just coffee." Aisha did not reach for it. She looked at the cup, then at him, then back at her bags. Her jaw tightened. "I don't need saving," she said. Her voice was flat, practiced, like she had said this sentence before to other people in other doorways. "I need to finish before the trucks come at 6. She turned back to the bins, reached in, pulled out a can, crushed it, dropped it in the bag, reached in again. A rhythm designed to end the conversation without saying another word. Desmond did not leave. He did not step closer either. He set the coffee on the window ledge of the building beside them, stepped back, gave her space. Then he said the thing he had been thinking about for 2 days. "I'm not here to save you. I read your thesis. The one on infant mortality in under-resourced communities, the community health worker model." He paused. "I want to know how someone who wrote that ended up here." Aisha stopped moving. Her hand froze inside the recycling bin. She did not pull it out. She did not look at him. She just stopped. Like someone had pressed pause on every muscle in her body. 10 seconds of silence. The longest 10 seconds Desmond had experienced since the night he sat in a hospital hallway holding his mother's purse. Then she pulled her hand out of the bin slowly, stood up straight, turned to face him, and the look on her face was not gratitude. It was not relief. It was something closer to terror. "How do you know about that?" Her voice cracked on the last word. Not from cold, from something deeper. The sound of a wall developing a fracture it was not designed to have. "I looked you up," Desmond said. "After last week, when your papers fell, I saw the cover page. And I searched your name. Aisha's face went through 3 emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, then shame, then anger. The anger won. So you Googled me. It was not a question. You saw my thesis and decided to come down here and do what, exactly? Offer me coffee and ask me to explain my life story to a stranger in a suit. Do you want a photo too? Something for your company newsletter CEO helps the homeless story at 11. Every word landed like a slap. Not because she was wrong, because she was not entirely wrong. Desmond had spent his entire career controlling situations, controlling people. This was not going the way he had planned. And for the first time in years, he did not know what to say next. No, he said finally. No photo, no newsletter. I run a logistics company, 23,000 employees. Your research is relevant to something we're building. I came here because I read your work, and I have questions that a Google search can't answer. Aisha studied him, the way she had once studied datasets, looking for inconsistencies, for the lie beneath the surface. People don't stand on sidewalks at 5 in the morning asking strangers about academic research, she said. People don't sort aluminum cans into 3 separate categories with route optimization either, he replied. But here we both are. Something shifted, not a wall coming down. Not trust, more like a hairline crack in the suspicion, a fraction of an opening that might close again at any second. I have to work, she said. Quieter now. Less sharp. The trucks come at 6 and I need another 40 cans to hit my number for the day. Desmond nodded. He stepped back. He did not push. The coffee is on the ledge if you want it, he said. And if you ever want to talk about your research, I'm on the 31st floor, every morning. Before 5, he turned and walked toward the glass doors, did not look back, took the elevator to 31, sat at his desk, and looked out the window. She was still there, still sorting, still working. But at 5:22, she stopped, walked to the window ledge, picked up the coffee. She held it for a moment, looking at it like it might contain something more complicated than caffeine. Then she took one sip, set it back down, picked up her bags, and walked away. She left the cup on the ledge, but it was lighter than when he had set it down. And that single missing sip told Desmond more than any conversation could have. She was not ready, but she was not completely closed. It was the smallest opening he had ever worked with. And it was enough. To understand why Aisha walked away that morning, you need to understand what she had already walked through. After Wendell died, after the bills arrived, after the eviction notice, and the nights in the car, Aisha did what every resourceful person does when the ground disappears beneath them. She reached out, she asked for help. She believed that the years she had spent building relationships, earning respect, and contributing to her community would mean something when she needed it most. She was wrong. The first call she made was to her former colleague, a woman named Degre, who had worked beside her for 4 years at the nonprofit. They had shared lunch breaks, proofread each other's grant proposals, attended each other's birthday dinners. Aisha called her 3 days after losing her job, explained what had happened, asked if Degre knew of any openings, any contacts, any leads. Degre said she would look into it. She never called back. Aisha texted twice. Read receipts, confirmed delivery. No response. The second call was to her graduate school advisor at Drexel, a professor who had once described Aisha's thesis as one of the strongest he had reviewed in 15 years. He answered. He expressed sympathy. He said the words, "Let me see what I can do." 2 weeks later, his assistant emailed to say the professor was on sabbatical and would follow up upon return. He never did. Aisha applied to 47 positions over 6 months. Program coordinator roles, health outreach positions, community development jobs, even administrative assistant openings that paid less than half of what she had earned before. She received 3 interview requests, 3 out of 47. Every interview followed the same arc. The first 10 minutes went well. Her qualifications were strong, her references solid, her knowledge of public health systems deeper than most candidates in the room. Then the question came. I see there's a gap in your employment history. Can you walk us through that? And Aisha, who had never learned to lie about the worst year of her life, told the truth. My husband died. I lost my home. I have been staying in a shelter with my daughter. I am rebuilding. The interviewers nodded. They said the right things. They promised to be in touch. They never were. Because the truth Aisha told them was not the kind of truth that fits neatly into a hiring decision. It was messy. It was uncomfortable. It raised questions that HR departments prefer not to ask. Can she handle the pressure? Is she stable? Will her personal situation affect her work? Aisha's competence was never in question. Her circumstances were. And then there was the church. 4 months into homelessness, Aisha heard about a community support event at a church in Fishtown. Free meals, clothing donations, resume help, a place that promised dignity and assistance. She went. Kaya stayed at the shelter daycare. The event was real. The food was warm. A volunteer helped her update her resume. For the first time in months, Aisha felt like someone was treating her as a person, not a problem. Then she noticed a woman with an iPhone, taking photos, not of the event, of the people, of the line, of the faces, of mothers holding children and men in donated jackets. One of those photos was of Aisha, taken without permission. From 10 feet away, she was holding a plate of food looking down, unaware that her image was being captured by a stranger. That photo appeared on Facebook the next day. A woman named Kathleen Bryce, who described herself as a community advocate and volunteer, posted it with a caption that read, "Spent my Saturday serving those less fortunate. So humbling to give back. God is good." The photo received 2,300 likes, 47 comments, 12 shares. Kathleen Bryce received praise for her generosity, her compassion, her big heart. Aisha received nothing. Not a dollar. Not a job lead. Not even the courtesy of being asked whether she wanted her face on the internet as proof of someone else's virtue. She found the post a week later, stared at it for a long time, then closed her phone and never went back to a charity event again. There is a term in social work research, dignity gap. It describes the distance between the help people need and the humiliation they are required to endure to receive it. Fill out this form, proving you are poor enough. Sit in this waiting room, proving you are patient enough. Stand in this line, proving you are desperate enough. Smile for this photo, proving you are grateful enough. The American system of assistance often requires people to perform their poverty in order to access relief. And for someone like Aisha, a woman who had spent her career on the other side of that equation, designing programs that were specifically built to avoid this kind of dehumanization, the experience was not just frustrating, it was devastating. She did not hate rich people. She did not resent charity. She hated being reduced to a story someone else told about themselves, a prop in a photograph, a line on a volunteer's Instagram. She had been a program director, a researcher, a published author. And now she was content for someone else's feed. So when a man in a $12,000 suit showed up on a sidewalk offering coffee and asking about her thesis, every alarm in her body fired at once. Not because he was unkind, because she had learned that kindness from strangers always came with a receipt, and she was done paying. The morning after the coffee, Aisha did not return to the corner outside Harris Meridian Tower. She shifted her route, replaced the financial district with a longer loop through Rittenhouse Square and down toward the Schuylkill Banks Trail. The yield was lower, $21 instead of $28. But $21 without being watched felt safer than $28 under observation. Desmond arrived at 4:46 a.m. 2 coffees in hand. He waited. 5 o'clock passed, then 5:30, then 6. At 6:15, the sanitation truck turned the corner and began emptying the recycling bins he had watched her sort through every morning for a week. She was not coming. He stood on the sidewalk holding 2 cups of coffee that were getting cold and felt something he could not name. Not anger, not rejection, something quieter, something that sat in the chest like a stone. And for the first time in many years, Desmond Harris felt like he had failed at something that had nothing to do with money. That night, he did what he always did when the penthouse got too quiet. He went back to the office, sat in his chair on the 31st floor, opened his laptop, and pulled up the PDF he had downloaded earlier that week from the Drexel University Digital Repository, Aisha's thesis. All 212 pages of it. He had skimmed it before, Read the abstract, the executive summary, the methodology section. Enough to understand the scope. Enough to know it was serious work. But tonight, with 2 cold coffees sitting on his desk and the city glowing orange through the windows, he started from page 1, and he read. He read about infant mortality rates in zip codes less than 4 miles from where he was sitting. He read about mothers who missed prenatal appointments because the nearest clinic required 2 bus transfers and a 40-minute wait. He read about community health workers, women from the neighborhoods themselves trained to provide basic care, education, and referrals. He read about the pilot program Aisha had designed, the 1,200 families, the 19% reduction in preterm births, and he kept reading. Past the data, past the recommendations, past the appendix, all the way to the last section. A section most people skip because it carries no scientific weight and offers no actionable insight. The acknowledgments. Aisha had written it in a voice different from the rest of the document. Not clinical, not academic, personal. The kind of voice someone uses when they stop writing for a committee and start writing for themselves. The first paragraph thanked her professors. The second thanked the community health workers who participated in the study. The third thanked Wendell for holding everything together while she spent 2 years buried in research. The fourth paragraph stopped Desmond cold. This work is dedicated to every mother who died waiting for care that never came, including Vivian Harris of West Philadelphia, whose story was shared with me by a community elder during my field interviews. A woman who walked 4 miles to a clinic that had already closed its doors for the day and died 3 days later from complications that $200 of antibiotics could have prevented. Her name does not appear in any official report, but she lived, she mattered, and she deserved better than what this system gave her. Desmond read it once, then again, then a third time. Vivian Harris, West Philadelphia, walked 4 miles to a clinic that had already closed, died 3 days later. His mother, that was his mother. Every detail, the 4 miles, the closed clinic, the antibiotics that never came, the 3 days. He had lived those 3 days. He had been 14 years old, sitting on a second-hand couch in a 1-bedroom apartment, watching his mother cough until she could not breathe, calling a hospital that put him on hold for 22 minutes. And this woman, this stranger who collected cans outside his building, who carried her thesis in a torn plastic bag like it was the last piece of herself she refused to surrender. She had found his mother's story in a neighborhood interview. She had written it down. She had placed it in a document that was read by researchers, policymakers, and public health professionals across the state. She had given Vivian Harris something that Desmond, with all his billions, had never been able to give her. A name in a record, proof that she existed, proof that she mattered. Proof that someone somewhere had listened to the story of a woman who died in a waiting room and decided it was worth remembering. Desmond set the laptop down. He leaned back in his chair. He stared at the ceiling. He did not cry. Crying was not something Desmond Harris had done since he was 14. But something moved through him that had the weight of tears without the release. He sat in that chair for 20 minutes, silent, alone. The office dark, except for the glow of the city through the glass. Then he spoke, not to anyone, to the room, to the air, to the memory of a woman who had been gone for 32 years. She knew your name, Mama. He closed the laptop, stood up, walked to the window, looked down at the empty corner where Aisha had stood every morning. And in that moment, the equation changed. Completely, permanently. Desmond could not give this woman money. Not because money would not help, it would. A check could solve her housing crisis in an afternoon. A wire transfer could clear the medical debt that had swallowed her life. He could write a number on a piece of paper and make every material problem she had disappear before sunrise. But that was not what she needed. Not from him. Not after what he had just read. She had honored his mother's memory when no one else had. She had done it with research, with rigor, with the kind of care that could not be bought. Handing her a check would reduce everything she was to a transaction. And Desmond Harris, who had spent 32 years believing that money was the only language the world understood, finally saw a moment where money was not enough. She did not need charity. She needed what had been taken from her. A seat at a table, A title that matched her expertise. A chance to do the work she was built to do. She needed a job, a real one. One that respected her, not rescued her. The next morning at 7:45 a.m., Desmond made a phone call. Not to a charity, not to a foundation. To Gwendolyn Tate, Senior Vice President of Human Resources at Harris Meridian Group. Gwendolyn had been with the company for 9 years. She was sharp, methodical, and deeply protective of the company's reputation. She answered on the second ring. "I need to create a new position," Desmond said. "No greeting, no small talk." "Good morning to you too," Gwendolyn replied dryly. "What kind of position?" "Director of Community Health Integration, embedded in the Employee Wellness Division, focused on reducing healthcare costs through community-based preventive care models." Silence. On the line for 3 seconds. Gwendolyn was calculating. She always calculated before she spoke. "We have never had a role like that. We spend $187 million a year on employee health care," Desmond said. "And our absentee rates in distribution centers are 18% above industry average. We need someone who can design a program from the inside, not a consultant, not an outsourced vendor. An in-house director with field experience in community health." "You already have someone in mind," Gwendolyn said. "Not a question. I do. Her name is Aisha Franklin. She holds a Master of Public Health from Drexel. Her thesis has been cited in 3 state-level research papers. She designed and ran a community health worker program that reduced preterm births by 19% in one of the most under-resourced neighborhoods in Philadelphia." Another pause, longer this time. "Send me the research," Gwendolyn said. "Already in your inbox." "And where is she now?" "Private practice. A university. She's experiencing homelessness." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Desmond had heard all morning. "Desmond." Gwendolyn's voice dropped. Not angry. "Careful. You're asking me to present a candidate to the executive board who is currently without housing. You understand what that means from a vetting perspective. I'm asking you to read her work first. If the work does not meet the standard, we move on. If it does, we evaluate her the same way we evaluate anyone else. Credentials, experience, capability. That's your job. I am not asking you to skip it. I am asking you to do it." Gwendolyn exhaled. "Give me 2 hours," she called back in 93 minutes. When can she interview? Desmond leaned back, allowed himself one small breath of something that might have been relief. "That's the problem," he said. "She doesn't know she's a candidate. And if I approach her wrong, she'll disappear," he explained. The mornings, the thesis, the coffee, the refusal, the way she had shifted her route to avoid him. He explained it the way a man who had spent his life solving problems with money explains the first problem that money could not touch. Gwendolyn listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "So, you need to find her, without making her feel hunted." "Yes. You can't use company resources to locate a private citizen. You know that. I know. And you can't stake out shelters or food banks. That crosses a line. I know that too. Then, what exactly is your plan?" Desmond looked out the window, down at the empty corner, at the recycling bins that would be emptied by 6:45 and refilled by evening, at the sidewalk where he had stood with 2 coffees and watched a woman walk away from the only person who had seen her in 14 months. "I go back to the same corner," he said, "every morning, same time, and I wait. That could take days. It could take weeks. And if she never comes back, then I was too late. And that's on me." Gwendolyn was quiet for a moment. "You really read that thesis, didn't you?" Desmond did not answer the question. He did not need to. Gwendolyn had worked with him long enough to hear what lived in the spaces between his words. "I'll hold the position open," she said. "But Desmond, if she comes in, she interviews like anyone else. No special treatment, no rubber stamp. If she's as good as the research suggests, she'll earn it on her own. That's exactly what I'm counting on." He hung up, walked to the window, looked down at the corner, and the next morning at 4:47 a.m., he was there again. 2 coffees. Same spot, same silence. The kind of patience that a man who had built a $7.8 billion empire had never once needed to exercise. Because every problem Desmond Harris had ever faced could be solved with a phone call, a wire transfer, or a contract. Every obstacle could be dismantled with enough resources applied at enough speed. But this was different. This required the one tool a billionaire almost never uses. He waited. That night, Aisha sat on the edge of her cot at the Germantown Avenue shelter with her knees pulled to her chest and her mind running in circles. Kaya was asleep beside her, one small hand wrapped around the ear of a stuffed rabbit that had lost most of its stuffing months ago. The shelter was quiet, except for the hum of the heating unit and the occasional cough from the room next door. Pauline sat across from her on the opposite cot, 62 years old, former elementary school teacher, 28 years in the Philadelphia public school system before a stroke took her mobility, her job, and eventually her apartment. 3 years in shelters. She had seen every version of pride and fear that walked through those doors. Aisha told her everything. The man in the suit, the coffee, the fact that he had read her thesis, the way he said he wanted to know how she ended up here, and the way she had walked away. Pauline listened without interrupting. When Aisha finished, the older woman folded her arms and looked at her the way she used to look at a student who gave the wrong answer on purpose. Baby pride doesn't feed Kaya. Aisha flinched. Not because it was harsh, because it was true. And if that man read your work, Pauline continued your actual work, not a photo of you in a food line, not a story about how sad your life is, but the research you spent 2 years building that is not charity, that is recognition. And you do not get to throw that away because you are scared. Aisha stared at the floor. The linoleum was cracked in 3 places near her cot. She had counted them every night for the past 4 months. You don't understand, Aisha said quietly. Every time I've trusted someone since Wendell died, it's cost me something. Degre never called back. The interviews went nowhere. That woman at the church put my face on the internet without asking. I can't afford to be wrong again, Pauline. I don't have anything left to lose except Kaya, and I will not risk her on a stranger's word. Pauline leaned forward. You're not risking Kaya by talking to this man. You're risking Kaya by not talking to him. Because I have been in this shelter 3 years, and let me tell you what I know. This place keeps you alive, but it does not let you live. Kaya needs a school that stays the same from month to month. She needs a room that is hers. She needs to stop asking you why you sleep sitting up. Aisha said nothing. She reached for her notebook, the one she carried every day, flipped it open to the last page she had used. A column of numbers, 23, 27, 31, 19, 28, 24, 30, 26. Not a single day above $35, 14 months of data, 14 months of precision, and the math had never once been in her favor. $30 a day, $900 a month. The cheapest studio apartment in Philadelphia cost $1,100. Even if she added a weekend route, even if she pushed her daily haul to 35, the number did not work. It was never going to work. She had known this for months. She had just refused to say it out loud. After Pauline fell asleep, Aisha pulled out her phone. The cracked screen glowed pale blue in the dark. She opened the browser, typed 2 words. Desmond Harris. The results appeared instantly. CEO and founder, Harris Meridian Group. Net worth $7.8 billion. Headquarters, Philadelphia. Board memberships, magazine features, conference keynotes. Her thumb hovered over the back button. This was exactly the kind of person she had trained herself to avoid. Powerful, connected. The kind of man who could turn her into a story or discard her without consequence. But she kept scrolling, and then she saw it. A press release from 18 months ago. Harris Meridian Foundation donates $4.2 million to community health programs in West Philadelphia. West Philadelphia. She read it again. The foundation had partnered with 2 clinics and a community health organization to expand prenatal care and chronic disease screening in the same zip codes Aisha had studied for her thesis. The same neighborhoods, the same streets, the same population. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she closed her eyes, and she thought about something Pauline had said weeks ago, not tonight, but on one of those early evenings when Aisha had first arrived at the shelter and was still pretending she was fine. The hardest part of being here is not the cold Pauline had told her. It's deciding whether you still believe your life can be different. Aisha opened her eyes, looked at Kaya, at the stuffed rabbit with no stuffing, at the notebook full of numbers that would never add up. She set her alarm for 4:30 a.m. The next morning, she walked to the corner of Walnut and 18th Street, the same corner she had avoided for days. She arrived at 5:02. The streetlights were still on. The recycling bins were full. And there he was, standing on the sidewalk, 2 coffees in hand, same spot, same coat, like a man who had been showing up every morning whether anyone came or not. Aisha stopped 15 feet away. Her bags were over her shoulder. Her thesis was in the inside pocket of her jacket. Her hands were shaking. Not from cold. Desmond looked at her, did not move, did not speak first, just held out the coffee the way you hold a door for someone who might not walk through it. Aisha crossed the distance, took the cup, wrapped both hands around it. "I don't want money," she said. "I don't want pity. And if you take a photo of me, I will disappear and you will never find me again." "No money," Desmond said. "No pity. No photos." "Then what do you want?" "I want to offer you a job interview." Aisha blinked. Of every sentence she had prepared herself to hear, that was not one of them. "I read your thesis," Desmond continued. "All of it. My company spends $187 million a year on employee health care. Your community health worker model is exactly the kind of program we need to build internally. I have created a position, Director of Community Health Integration, and I want you to interview for it." Aisha's jaw tightened. "You don't even know me. I know your research. I know your results. 1,200 families, 19% reduction in preterm births, 3 state-level citations. I know what you built. And I know what it cost you to carry that thesis in a plastic bag for 14 months instead of throwing it away." Silence. 5 seconds. 10. "This is real," Aisha said. "Not a question. A test. The interview is with my head of HR. She read your work yesterday. She has questions, tough ones. If you do not meet the standard, you will not be hired. This is not a gift. This is not a favor. It is a job, and you will earn it or you will not." This time she did not walk away. 3 days later, Aisha Franklin walked through the glass doors of Harris Meridian Tower, the same doors she had watched from the sidewalk every morning for weeks, the same lobby she had seen only from the outside, through glass smudged by rain and breath and time. She wore a navy blazer borrowed from Pauline. It was slightly too wide at the shoulders. The sleeves had been folded once at the cuffs to keep them from covering her hands. Her shoes were the same sneakers she wore on her collection routes, cleaned the night before with a damp cloth and a toothbrush. Her thesis was in a new clear binder she had purchased for $3.75 at a copy shop on Market Street. The security guard at the front desk asked for her name. She gave it. He typed it into the system, printed a visitor badge, handed it to her with a smile that said nothing about her clothes. 28th floor, he said. Elevators to your left. She rode the elevator alone, watched the numbers climb. 14, 18, 22, 26, 28. The doors opened to a hallway with polished floors and framed photographs of shipping routes and distribution centers spanning 6 continents. A woman was waiting for her. Tall, sharp eyes. Professional smile that was warm but not casual. Aisha Franklin. "I'm Gwendolyn Tate, Senior Vice President of Human Resources. Thank you for coming in." They shook hands. Gwendolyn led her to a conference room at the end of the hall. Glass walls, a long mahogany table, 8 chairs, a pitcher of water and 2 glasses, already set out, and a view. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Aisha could see the street below. The corner of Walnut and 18th, the recycling bins, the exact spot where she had crouched every morning sorting aluminum for pennies. From up here the sidewalk looked small, clean, almost beautiful. 14 months ago she had stood on that sidewalk looking up at these windows wondering what kind of people worked behind them. Now she was sitting in one of their chairs with a borrowed blazer and a $3 binder about to be evaluated by the very system that had overlooked her for over a year. Desmond was already seated at the far end of the table. He nodded once, said nothing. His presence was not a comfort. It was a signal. To Gwendolyn, to Aisha, to the room itself. This mattered. The interview lasted 47 minutes. Gwendolyn asked about her methodology. Aisha walked her through the community health worker training model step by step, the recruitment criteria, the curriculum she designed, the supervision structure, the outcome metrics. Gwendolyn asked about scalability. Aisha explained how the model could be adapted for corporate environments with distributed workforces. She referenced 3 case studies from peer-reviewed journals. She drew a rough framework on the whiteboard, showing how embedded health workers at 4 distribution centers could reduce absenteeism and emergency room utilization within 12 months. Gwendolyn asked about cost projections. Aisha estimated that a full-scale pilot at Harris Meridian could reduce annual employee healthcare expenditure by $12 to $18 million within 2 fiscal years based on the outcomes her original program had demonstrated. 42 minutes in, Gwendolyn paused, set her pen down, looked at Aisha with an expression that had shifted from professional evaluation to something else, something quieter. "There is one more question," Gwendolyn said. "It is not about your methodology," Aisha straightened. "In your thesis in the acknowledgments section, you dedicated your work to mothers who died waiting for care. You mentioned a specific case, a woman named Vivian Harris, from West Philadelphia, who walked 4 miles to a clinic that had already closed and died 3 days later." Aisha's breath caught. She had not expected anyone to read the acknowledgments. Most people skipped them. They were personal. They were hers. "Do you know," Gwendolyn continued carefully, "whether there is any connection between that woman and this company?" Aisha shook her head slowly. "No. I collected that story during field interviews in West Philadelphia. A community elder shared it with me. I included it because it represented exactly the kind of preventable death my research was designed to address." Gwendolyn looked at Desmond. He had not moved during the entire interview. His hands were flat on the table. His face was still. He nodded. Gwendolyn turned back to Aisha. "Vivian Harris was Desmond's mother. She died when he was 14 years old. The story you documented in your thesis, the 4 miles, the closed clinic, the $200 of medication that could have saved her, that is the story of the woman who raised the man sitting at the end of this table." The room went silent. Not the silence of a pause between sentences, the silence of something breaking open. Aisha looked at Desmond. He looked back, and in his eyes she saw something she had not seen in any of the mornings on the sidewalk, any of the conversations through glass and distance and suspicion. She saw a boy, 14 years old, holding his mother's purse in a hospital hallway, waiting for someone to tell him what to do next. Her hand went to her mouth, not dramatic, not performative, the small, involuntary gesture of a person who suddenly understands the weight of something they had been carrying without knowing. She had written about his mother, not as a statistic, not as a data point, as a woman with a name and a story and a death that mattered. She had placed that name in a document read by researchers, policymakers, and students across the state. She had given Vivian Harris a voice in the only record that would outlast them all academic literature, and she had done it years before she ever knew that Vivian's son existed, years before she stood on his sidewalk, years before the morning her bag tore open and a thesis fell onto wet pavement. "I didn't know," Aisha said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I know," Desmond said. And those 2 words carried 32 years of grief, gratitude, and the kind of recognition that no amount of money could manufacture. Gwendolyn allowed the moment to settle. Then she picked up her pen. "Miss Franklin, based on your qualifications, your research, and the interview we have just conducted, I am recommending you for the position of Director of Community Health Integration at Harris Meridian Group. The role includes a salary commensurate with senior director-level full medical and dental benefits, effective on your start date, and a 6-month housing assistance stipend through the company's Employee Transition Program." She paused. "Do you have any questions?" Aisha looked at the window, at the sidewalk below, at the bins, at the corner, where she had spent 14 months turning aluminum into survival. "When do I start?" 12 months later, Aisha Franklin stood at a podium at the American Public Health Association annual conference in Chicago. 312 people sat in the audience. Researchers, public health directors, hospital administrators, policy advisors. The same kind of room she had stood in years ago before the accident, before the bills, before the sidewalk. But this time was different. This time she was not presenting theory. She was presenting results. In her first year as Director of Community Health Integration at Harris Meridian Group, Aisha had built a program from nothing. She recruited and trained 35 community health workers drawn from the same neighborhoods where the company's distribution centers operated. Women and men who understood the barriers their coworkers faced, not because they had studied them, but because they had lived them. Transportation gaps, childcare shortages, delayed prescriptions, untreated chronic conditions that turned into emergency room visits, that turned into missed workdays, that turned into lost jobs. The program launched at 4 distribution centers across Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Within 12 months, employee sick days dropped by 22%. Emergency room visits among program participants fell by 31%. The estimated cost savings for Harris Meridian in year 1 was $14.3 million. Those numbers landed in the conference room with the weight of proof. Not theoretical models, not projections, proof. 3 companies approached Aisha after the presentation. 2 logistics firms and a regional hospital network. They wanted her model. They wanted to know how to replicate it. She agreed to consult on the design with Desmond's full support, and within 6 months, 3 additional pilot programs were underway in 3 different states. Kaya enrolled in a public elementary school in the Fairmount neighborhood of Philadelphia. She had a desk that was hers, a cubby with her name on it, a bedroom in a 2-bedroom apartment that Aisha paid for with a salary she had earned. The first morning, Kaya walked into that school with a backpack and a lunchbox and a pair of new shoes. Aisha stood on the sidewalk outside and pressed her hand against her chest. Not because it hurt, because for the first time in 14 months, it did not. Desmond did not give Aisha charity. He did not rescue her. He did not swoop in and fix her broken life with a check. He read her work. He respected her expertise. He created a real position based on a real need, and he gave her a fair shot at earning it. That distinction mattered more than the dollar amount of any donation. And Desmond changed too, not in the dramatic cinematic way that stories like this usually promise. He did not become a different person overnight. He did not suddenly trust the world or stop checking his accounts or let his guard down with strangers. But he did something he had not done in 32 years. He said his mother's name in public. The Vivian Harris Community Health Center opened on a Saturday in October on a quiet block in West Philadelphia, 4 blocks from the apartment where Desmond grew up, 2 blocks from the clinic that had been closed the day his mother walked 4 miles to reach it. The center offered free primary care prenatal services and mental health counseling. Walk-in hours. No appointment needed. No paperwork required before you could be seen. Desmond stood at the ribbon cutting with Aisha beside him, not as a couple, not as a fairy tale, as 2 people who had found each other at the exact intersection of grief and purpose, and who had chosen to build something instead of walk away. Their relationship was professional, respectful, grounded in the kind of mutual recognition that does not need romance to be meaningful. Desmond trusted Aisha because she had earned that trust with competence, not gratitude. And Aisha respected Desmond because he had seen her at her lowest and responded not with pity, but with a question no one else had asked. How did someone who wrote that end up here? That question changed everything. Not because the answer was dramatic, but because the act of asking it, of seeing a person's capability instead of their circumstance, of responding to expertise with opportunity, instead of responding to poverty with a handout that was the thing the world almost never does. Real help is not giving someone money. Real help is seeing the value that everyone else has overlooked and creating the conditions for that value to be used. A job, a chance, a seat at the table. The dignity of being evaluated for what you can do, not pitied for what has been done to you. Every morning, Aisha still woke up at 5 a.m. Not because she had to, not because the trucks were coming at 6:45, but because 14 months on the streets of Philadelphia had taught her something that no degree, no job title, and no salary could undo. The quietest hours are the ones where you hear yourself most clearly, and Aisha Franklin had learned to listen. Now, before you go, there is something I want to say directly, not as a narrator, as the person who put this story together. This story is fictional. Desmond Harris is not a real person. Aisha Franklin is not a real person. The events described here did not happen, but the numbers are real. The systemic issues are real, and the people they represent are standing on real sidewalks in real cities right now. Medical debt is the #1 cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States. Over 500,000 families file each year with medical expenses as the primary driver. 1 in 4 people experiencing homelessness in America holds a college degree or higher. 40% of unhoused individuals are employed. They work, they earn paychecks, and they still cannot afford a place to sleep. These are not political opinions. These are documented, researched, published facts. When I was writing this story, the moment that stayed with me longest was not the twist. It was not the job offer. It was not even the connection between Aisha's thesis and Desmond's mother. The moment that would not leave my mind was the one where Desmond saw her thesis on the sidewalk, and she said, "That's nothing." That's nothing. 2 words, said by a woman holding the most important work of her life, dismissing it because her circumstances made her believe it no longer counted. And I kept asking myself, how many people do we walk past every day who are carrying something extraordinary and hiding it because the world has taught them that their situation disqualifies their value? How many resumes sit unsent because the gap in employment is too long? How many degrees hang on walls in shelters? How many ideas die in the minds of people too exhausted by survival to speak them out loud? If you or someone you know is experiencing homelessness or housing instability, resources exist. The National Alliance to End Homelessness at endhomelessness.org provides information on local programs. The 211 helpline, available in every state, connects individuals with housing, food, and healthcare services. Community health worker programs are expanding across the country, and many offer free training and certification for people looking to rebuild careers in public health. If this story made you think of someone you know who is fighting a battle, they do not talk about someone who has been invisible for too long, share this video with them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for another person is simply to let them know you see them. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about the people the world overlooks and the moments that change everything, subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell, not because I need the numbers, but because every time you show up, it reminds me that these stories matter, that the people in them, real or fictional, deserve to be heard, because everyone has a story. And no circumstance, no sidewalk, no torn plastic bag should ever be allowed to erase it.